If you listened to yesterday's episode, you'll recall we talked about isolation, how narcissistic abuse gradually separates you from friends, family, and even yourself. It's not just loneliness, it's a deliberate tool of control. Today, we're going to focus on the way forward because isolation doesn't have to be permanent. Healing starts with connection. But I realize that after everything you've been through, that can feel impossible. Hi, I'm Kyle Hackley, attorney and author of Undercurrent, where we follow Annie's journey through narcissistic abuse and beyond. Now, while Annie's story takes us through conversations, remember, Annie isn't just one person. Annie represents anyone who has been through narcissistic abuse. So now let's start talking about why you shouldn't do any of this alone, how to break free from isolation, and how connection can help you rebuild your life. When you've been in a narcissistic relationship, isolation becomes your normal. Even after you physically left the relationship, the emotional isolation lingers because after so much gaslighting and invalidation, you may not even trust yourself anymore. But here's the truth. Healing doesn't happen in isolation. It happens with connection. When you're all alone, all you have is that voice in your head, the one the narcissist spent years programming, that voice that might still be whispering, well, maybe it was all my fault. No one's ever going to believe me. Maybe I should just stay quiet. But when you connect with someone who truly sees you, who believes you and understands what you've been through, that voice starts to lose its power. Connection isn't just emotional, it's biological. Being seen, heard, and validated actually rewires your brain. It helps your nervous system recover from trauma. It reminds you that you're not broken, you were manipulated. At this point, you might be thinking, okay, all this makes sense, but how am I supposed to ever trust anyone again? After narcissistic abuse, I know trust just seems like dangerous. You've been hurt and you've been betrayed, and likely the people that you thought you could count on weren't there for you. So let's be real. Rebuilding trust isn't about blindly trusting people. It's about learning to trust wisely. And I think this is the key. You start by not trusting others, you start by trusting yourself. Now, that might sound strange, but after years of the gaslighting, your instincts have been trained to second guess just about everything. So instead of looking outward first, start by reconnecting with your own gut, your own truth, and your own inner voice. And here's some ways I think you can do it. It worked for Annie, and so it might work for you. Your body often knows the truth before your mind does. If someone makes you feel anxious, tense, or emotionally drained, even if you're not even sure why, pay attention to that feeling. That's your intuition speaking. We've been conditioned to override the signals because we've been telling ourselves, oh, we're overreacting. But if you're always feeling on edge around someone, if your stomach knots up during a conversation, or you leave a person just feeling emotionally exhausted, that's a big red flag. Your body remembers what your mind tries to rationalize. So listen to it. Test small at first. Instead of opening up deeply right away, start with small, low risk interactions and see how the person responds. After narcissistic abuse, it's tempting to put your walls up so high that you can't be hurt again. But trust wisely. Instead of opening up too fast or too deeply, maybe start with low risk interactions. Share a little bit about yourself and see how the person responds. Did they listen without interrupting you? Did they seem genuinely interested in you? Or did they steer the conversation back to themselves? When you express an opinion, do they respect it or do they dismiss it? Safe people earn your trust over time. They don't demand it right away. Watch their patterns, not just their words. Remember, safe people don't make you feel crazy. If someone dismisses your feelings and minimizes your experience or makes you second guess yourself, I don't think that they're safe. Trust is about finding, Trust isn't about finding the perfect person who will never hurt you. It's about finding people who respect you, hear you, and don't make you feel small. I think deep down, you already know all of this. Your gut, your intuition, it's been speaking to you all along. Maybe it was muffled by the gaslighting and the self-doubt. Maybe you were told so many times that you were wrong, you started to believe that. But if you sit quietly and really listen to yourself, you already know who feels safe and who doesn't. You know who drains your energy and who respects your space. This is about trusting yourself again. It's about taking what you've learned from the narcissist, not just the pain, but the wisdom, and apply it. Because once you have seen those patterns of abuse, you can't unsee it. Once again, this is what Annie did. She stopped second guessing herself. She stopped explaining away all the red flags, and she started to listen to what her intuition had been telling her the entire time. It worked for Annie. Maybe it will work for you too. And even as you start trusting yourself again, here's something else to remember. You don't have to do it alone. I realize it's easier said than done. After everything you've been through, the idea of opening yourself up again can feel overwhelming. And finding the right people? That's a challenge of its own. But healing happens in connection with people who see you, who believe you, who don't make you question yourself. So consider this. Find a support group filled with people who truly understand. Listen to survivor podcasts. Even if you're not ready to talk yet, hearing shared experiences is a first step toward reconnecting. Of course, if you've been following me, you know how I love equine therapy because so many people find a connection through horses because they don't judge, they don't gaslight, they don't ask you why you stayed. They respond to who you are in the moment, and they can help you build or rebuild your confidence and trust on your timeline. And join online communities. If in person feels too overwhelming, there are private support networks where you can engage anonymously until you're ready, but please do your research. Make sure the online group is safe. One of the most powerful moments in healing is when you hear someone else's story and think, that's me. That's exactly what I went through. That moment can undo isolation in an instant because you realize you're not alone. You were never alone, and it was the abuse that made you feel that way. But it was never true. That's why validation is just so important. That's why telling your story, even if it's only to one safe person, it can be life-changing. Because the moment someone looks at you and says, I believe you, It can undo years of manipulation in seconds. So if you're listening to this right now, I want you to hear this. You are not crazy. You're not imagining it, and you're not alone. And you don't have to do this alone anymore. Breaking free from isolation doesn't mean you have to open yourself up to everyone. It just means you have to take one small step toward connection. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode. If you would share them in the comments or even reach out to me on my email. That's why AreYouAnnie exists. When you share your story, you're not just speaking for yourself. You are lighting the way for so many other people, and you don't realize it. AreYouAnnie is for anyone who needs validation and support. It's about walking through fire to reach the other side of narcissistic abuse. It's about reclaiming the pieces of who you are and stepping back into your power. If you haven't already, would you please subscribe or like this episode? I really believe when you do that, you can help other people find us. Now, I may not know you personally, but I believe I know your story because I know Annie. The details, of course, are always different, but the patterns are the same. And if you see yourself in Annie's journey, just know you're not alone. As always, I want you to know that you are not just a survivor, you are a warrior against narcissistic abuse. You are stronger than you know. And I want you to be tenacious and never give up on what's important to you. Thank you so much for listening. Let's continue this journey together, and I will see you next time. Bye.